All right, welcome everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the regular council meeting for Monday, June the 12th, 2023. I'd like to remind everyone, meeting participants, to be advised that the meeting is to be recorded for public access and broadcasting purposes. With that, I'd like to call the meeting to order, and do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
So moved by Councillor Thorne, seconded by Councillor Glant. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion carried. I'd like to remind everyone that there's conflict of interest forms in the middle of the table. If you have any conflict of interest to declare, please do so by filling out the form and informing the clerk. With that, item number 4, adoption of the minutes, adoption of the regular council meeting from May the 8th, 2023.
Oh, so moved.
Motion by Councillor Thorne, second by Councillor Colwell. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded?
I have a question.
Question, okay.
So on, I think it was there was a statement made around the bylaws and the priorities around the bylaws, which included the priority around unsightly premises. But I've since learned in some correspondence with Austin, we can't actually make that bylaw unless we can enforce it. And so are we still gonna go with that? How does that work?
We can enforce the bylaw if we have a municipal bylaw. So right now we don't have an unsightly premises bylaw in place, so it falls under the province. So we have no legal authority over it. As soon as we approve a bylaw, we can enforce it. However, council will then have to appoint someone to enforce it, which would probably be Diane or I, for the purposes of unsightly premises, and the motion would stipulate that because we don't have basically the capacity per se to start adding that on. But for unsightly premises, when a bylaw is drafted, there can be a motion to basically to make sure that there is someone in place to enforce said.
Should we be waiting when we have conversations, I know we're going to have about resources,
Right.
to determine whether we're gonna have resources to be able to enforce that before we decide whether we're gonna have a bylaw or not?
Yes.
Forward on at that time. then.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Any additional questions to the motion to approve the minutes? No additional questions. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion carried. I will need a motion for the approval of the committee of the whole meeting from May the 23rd, 2023.
So moved.
So moved by Councillor Thorne, seconded by Deputy Mayor Bannister. All in favor, or any questions to the motion? No questions to the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded?
Aye.
Motion carried. With that, item number 5, there are many items in the consent agenda package this evening. Are there any questions to any of the items in the consent agenda package? With no questions, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda items?
So moved.
So moved by Councillor Glant, seconded by Councillor Bannister. All in favor, or any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Right.
Contrary minded? Motion carried.
I think there's a language on, we just want to make sure if he's voting yay or nay.
Yeah.
Can we double check? Okay.
So I heard each time.
Is it for the yay or nay?
I think it's yay.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry. Item number 6, public and administrative presentations. With that, we have St. John Ambulance, and we have Wayne Gladstone. Officer Wayne, come forward, or
Yep.
Wayne, if you'd like to come forward.
They should or not, but I'll. Hearing that the council or the village is, the town, sorry, is taking over the school this year. And they do not have a AED on site. The Salisbury St. John Ambulance would like to present to council a new AED for the pool. And in here is the AED, the box to put it in.
Right.
And I do believe the instructions are in there to teach all the young people how to use it.
Right.
And I sure hope they never have to use it.
Too. That's, we're so appreciative of everything that St. John Ambulance does. Wayne
for your many years of service and for all you do for our community and continue to do. It's just so appreciated and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, this is money that the village has paid St. John Ambulance over the last 50 years, 60 years or so. So,
You guys have provided a great service over that time,
Well-
so. I don't know if anybody's noticed, but Wayne has like more, like the ribbons for like 40-year service and 50-year service. He's just been an amazing resource for our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you. Very generous.
there, now you can know how to use it next time.
It's St. Charles. Should we have a picture?
No.
Okay, never mind.
Oh.
Sorry, Wayne.
Yeah, okay, let's get a picture.
I got an informal one.
Let's get a picture.
Did you? Yeah, we can take a
Yeah.
formal one. Yeah, we can.
Yeah, I
take-
got a formal one.
Oh, you have to come back.
Ready, you're prettied up.
Oh, yeah, I'm all prettied up here.
I will have it outside the box, right?
Yes, might as well. have
Yes.
it.
Oh, can you take those top?
Yeah,
ones?
take the,
Anything else on it?
No, you're.
no, that's good.
I like to see that one.
Find the way.
They're Austin dressed in black and a defibrillator.
That's so
Uh-oh.
scary.
Surely one of those will work. Thank you.
Oh, well done.
Thank you, Ray.
Now, the only part I have is I want you to slow the trains down, but you do.
Um, The next item is Pets International, to talk about, building expansion with Jordan Davidson. Is David from-
I don't see Jordan here unless it's hiding. No, I don't see him here right now.
We'll move on to item number 3, public hearing rezoning proposal, PID 009544404. Lori, if you'd like to come forward for the first from the Regional Service Commission. Welcome, Lori, as always. Pleasure to have you here.
Likewise, it's great to be here. Diane's got
You
my
ready?
magic presentation there, so I'll start the public hearing just by going through a brief overview of the actual application that we have. So tonight is the public hearing for the rezoning request for 3058 Fredericton Road in Salisbury. This is a street view image, so I apologize in advance if it's a little outdated, but the photos that I had taken were in the winter time, so I figured this was more appropriate. So the proposal itself, the applicant is requesting to rezone the property to permit warehousing activities, general office administration work, truck, tractor, trailer equipment repairs, as well as general maintenance, and the cleaning and washing of those vehicles on the property itself. This sounds familiar. It's probably because the majority of these activities are already occurring on the property, but in the next couple slides, you'll hear a little bit more as to why we're undertaking this particular process. But it has been actively being used for these various activities since 2012. So and you're gonna hear me talk about the WARP, which is the Westmoreland Albert Rural Plan. So when you guys amalgamated, of course, you took over 2 separate land use regulations. This particular property itself, which happens to be just at this location here, so just outside the former village boundaries, does fall under this particular regulation. So I've pulled out a couple policies for you. The first being 5.1, which just talks about the controlling the type and location of industrial development within the planning area. So it's a very general regulation or policy that's in place. And then there's policy proposals in that document as well that talks about discouraged locations. And those are the obvious ones. You wouldn't want to encourage industrial activity in conservation or water protection zones or adjacent to high residential uses. I have also pointed out that in the village of Salisbury, of course, that former boundary, we had a municipal plan that zoned that upper area as industrial. So because of its proximity to the industrial area already, this would be considered an encouraged location. Under the zoning regulations, so when that zoning bylaw came into place, it actually zoned this particular property as rural area. That zone does permit, light of, a range of uses from agriculture all the way up to light commercial. However, this particular activity that's going on would be more conducive to, commercial industrial zoning on the property. We do have some regulations as well in there that talks about some limited controls that should be in place, primarily around buffering around residential. However, we don't tend to have in this particular location, those requirements because of the, it's primarily rural or industrial that it's backing on. So the development does conform to these regulations. This is a site plan that's showing, so I did try to identify the areas in boxed in lines. So they would be looking at doing truck parking around the upper perimeter of the existing building itself. Then there's a blue area that kind of goes to the south and to the west of the property. That would be where they would be looking at parking the actual trailers for the trucks. And then the inner yellow box being the area where they would look at parking the long, I believe it's called long combination vehicle. So the double trailer scenario. And the area that I'm showing kind of in the orangey brown color would be the area that is indicated that they would not be able to wash vehicles within that because it's proximity to the water drainage system in the area. So they did receive a building permit in 2012 to start the development. At that time, there was no zoning land use controls in place. So they were legal. And today they still have legal non-conforming rights to continue the activities on the property. However, if they continued under non-conforming rights, should they look at doing any kind of expansions in the future, it does limit them on what they could do. So they're undertaking this process to rezone it to allow it to be a permitted use with the same rules and regulations that would apply for that particular zone. Staff of the planning department did want to, did agree that the zoning that was done in 2022 through that Westmoreland Albert Rural Plan was not an intentional adoption to make this a non-conforming use to phase out. It was just zoned rural area because of the large area that we were working on. So it wasn't targeted as a use to phase out. So kind of in this particular slide, I've shown the two zoning matched together. So on the upper side of that blue line, that would be the zoning that's under the rural area plan. And then the southern part being what's covered under the zoning bylaw for the former village. The municipal plan of the village does actually reference policy within it that talks about council looking towards in the future, taking this and identifying it as an industrial park area and expanding it as well. So again, even the current village zoning and municipal plan encourages this particular and supports this activity in this area. And they meet all the regulations of today. We did contact Department of Environment regarding environmental impact assessments and have confirmed that the water consumption that's being used on site would not trigger an environmental impact assessment. The Planning Review and Adjustment Committee is required when council adopts any municipal plan, adopts any rezoning bylaw to seek the views of the Planning Review and Adjustment Committee. They're scheduled to meet at the end of June, which upon that, their comments would automatically be circulated to council regarding their recommendation and the rezoning. And the last slide, so the Community Planning Act does require that council hold a public hearing for any amendments that they're proposing to change to a municipal plan or a rezoning regulation. And it provides the public the opportunity to speak for or against the proposal. Not only was notification published on the town's website as required under the act, but it was also notices were sent to property owners within 100 meters of this particular property. And to date, We've had no written comments received. A couple inquiries, looking for clarification did go into municipal staff, but, nothing has been received in writing. And that concludes, but I would turn it back over to, the mayor to, call to see if there's any public comments. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Lori. Are there any public comments that may wish to come forward this time? I'll ask you,
This moment in time, no.
pardon me?
The proceedings for that, should, the zoning be processed and what have you, and the schedule accordingly should take place within so many weeks if there is no argument against against that project?
Or different.
August
Lord.
14th?
With Lori.
So to clarify, once council holds a public hearing, then they're able to entertain readings. So the first reading is tentatively scheduled for next council meeting, which is June 12th, I believe. Or July 12th. And then third reading would be August.
I apologize, I received an email from the MLA today saying that the public hearing was tonight at 7 o'clock.
This is the public
is-
hearing,
Okay,
but they don't do readings on the same night as the public hearing. So, but the next council meeting would be
July 10th.
July 10th, which then they would do their first reading of the bylaw.
right?
And then following that
August
on
14th.
August 14th. Right?
Yeah.
They would,
August
get
14th, Yep,
third reading, and then it would become efficient.
and it becomes official as of August 14th.
Wait.
It's providing it goes through, okay.
Yes, there's still closing procedures of the mayor has to sign the bylaw. We have to register it in the registry office, but council at that point has already expressed their interest that they're changing the zone.
Okay, so in the event that council decided against this, or until that point, August 14th, and there's weeks or things to proceed afterwards, what is the latest that that project can get put through if there's arguments on July 10th or August 14th? Is there quite a process afterwards that, does it go by weeks after that, or?
No, their only stipulation would be there is 6 months, 6 months from the date that the ads were placed, that they have to make a decision to have it registered. But at this point in time, there would be no reason for them not to proceed.
Not to proceed with that,
No.
okay?
But it is council's decision at the end of the day, so
Right,
they will absorb the comments that are received, the presentation that was given, and they'll come back if they have any additional comments, but we would be submitting for the readings on those two next council meetings, which at
Okay,
the end of that, they would know.
perfect, thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, I'll just ask the people that are in attendance, are there any additional comments to the public presentation this evening? And be noted that there were no additional questions to the item. Thank you very much. So with that, item 7, reports and recommendations from committees in private meeting. Recommendations committee of the whole meeting, March 27th, 2023. And May 23rd, 2023.
Did you want to read them, Diane, or did you want me to? I can pull it up. You have it with you?
Yep.
Yeah.
You just want me to read it?
Yeah.
All right, so from the geophysical, you're gonna make me say that word, geophysical exploration. As presented by M Globe during the committee of the whole meeting on March the 27th, 2023, the next step, should council determine to proceed with further exploration of the water source, is to conduct a geophysical survey of 3 potential water source areas as approved during the committee of the whole meeting. Administration sought estimates from Englobe for the work, and which are included in your package.
I can give context, I can give a Cole's notes on that last piece. The
Okay.
only caveat that we'll give based on, since it has come from committee of the whole, is that the estimate, we have $80,000 budgeted for this from former Village of Salisbury subunit budget lines, and so those were completed. There was 30,000 already budgeted, 50,000 that was transferred in February or March, I forget the exact meeting. That was transferred from an existing, or a new actually, transportation line. And so we would be short on budget for the total estimate. We would obviously, should it be the will of council to proceed, keep council updated as to where we would be. The $8,000 difference or delta isn't a huge difference, obviously. However, there is HST. The other piece is that there's actually no guarantee that the geophysical company will be able to complete it this year even. So we would keep council updated on that, but we obviously can't proceed to advise them to at least put us on the schedule until we have the motion of council. And so this is obviously where they are a very specialized company and have to do very specialized work, and we are in a climate where there's snow half the year, and so you can't do their work during that time of the year, so they're busy at this point in time. In our last conversation with Englobe on Wednesday or Thursday of last week, they did say that they think it's still possible. It'll just be that it's the fall, so that will give us more of an indication as to where we're at budget wise now. However, we're not concerned because we're under budget or on budget for every line essentially. But I did want to flag that as well, just because 80,000 was transferred and 50,000 was transferred to add to the 30 for a total of 80, and the estimate including the package is at 88,000. So that's kind of the Cole's notes of the later part of that.
Do you have a
I don't-
copy of
yeah, I
the
don't think
page with the
that's in-
recommendations? Because it wasn't in the packet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's-
It's
It was not.
that page that you're reading there.
Okay.
It's okay, you can.
We just need to read the
The
recommendation.
recommendation,
right?
yeah.
You can read it, Joe.
There you go, Joe.
Okay. As recommended, that council authorize administration to engage Englobe Corporation and Sigma Geophysics Incorporated as a subcontractor to undertake a geophysical survey of two potential zones identified in the 2023 feasibility study at an approximate cost of $88,000 plus HST.
Questions to the motion?
Do we know when they're planning to start?
They can't give us a date until we have the motion.
We need to get into, we need
yeah.
to get into their queue first.
Yeah, and there is, like, we can't go on, it's private land right now, so we would have to have conversations with,
Okay.
that's part of the engineering
right.
fees. They would prepare the formal notice. The communication back and forth with landowners would happen internally through staff with Englobe support and expertise, because I'm not gonna be able to explain this geophysical process. I will rely on them, but I'll be the one kind of going back and forth, and then we would hope for the fall, but it will not happen in June for sure.
Yeah.
Not July, more than likely not August.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and if they, at some point it gets too close, we'll just bump it. Is what we'll do. We'll keep council updated.
How late in the year can they go till?
All depends on the weather, I would suspect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they can go, well, I would say till there's snow, but
Freezing.
probably till freezing. Yeah, it's gonna, yeah.
We don't
it's,
don't want them doing work either up really close to the
No.
limit either,
Yeah.
because,
No,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
they mentioned that in the report,
Yeah.
their preferences during
yeah.
any additional questions to the motion?
I had a quick question. I couldn't find in the Englobe report what two locations were being chosen for further study.
It's zone A and D, I believe. I will have to double check. It's the top, is it A and D, right? That's what I have.
DNA.
DNA, yeah. D was the, like, zone 4, zone D was the highest probability. Zone A was the second highest probability of the 4 that they looked at. And this was stressed to me as well in my conversation with Englobe. This is exclusively based on the geophysical formation of the earth. Hence why we're doing this geophysical investigation, to be able to dive in more and say, okay, where is it most likely? But the exact locations, I'm not exactly sure. If it's two intersections of of the river, but they are in the map that was presented in the feasibility study in March at committee of the whole.
There was 3, right, in that beginning?
There was 4, 3 recommended, they're recommending 2 for geophysical.
Okay,
Yeah, they're kind of scaling it back based on
okay.
probability, yeah.
Additional questions? There's no additional questions. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye, contrary minded? John, you're an
Aye.
aye? Motion carried.
All right, so the next one is an ad hoc bylaw committee. During the committee of the whole, on May the 23rd, council directed administration to proceed with a review of former bylaws and next steps to establishing certain new ones with the new municipal boundaries. So, I think he's printing off.
Yeah, I think so. I was gonna do that.
Send it to John.
Yes.
You want to say the recommendation is?
Thanks.
I would just wait for them and then one of them can say the recommendation.
Thank you.
Go on the second.
Okay,
Thank you, Scott.
we got it. Are you ready for the recommendation?
Are you ready, Diane? You good?
Are you ready, Diane?
Yeah.
That council enact a temporary and ad hoc committee of council pursuant to section
XX, that is the actual section.
Oh,
It's
is it?
real this time. It's funny, I double checked. That is the section.
I'm like,
Yeah,
Yeah, I thought.
of the procedural bylaw for the purposes of reviewing existing Village of Salisbury bylaws and review proposed potential Town of Salisbury bylaws, with meetings beginning in late summer, fall of 2023.
I'll second that.
Moved by Councillor Bannister, seconded by Councillor Bland. Questions to the motion? No questions to the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Contrary minded? Motion carried.
The last one, fleet management policy. So as presented to council during the committee of the whole meeting on May the 23rd, administration presented a proposed fleet management policy as part of ongoing work to ensure the town has adequate policies and procedures in place and to respond to a recommendation from our insurance provider. So again, a number of these procedures were or are already in place. The policy just formalizes the approach and aims to mitigate risk by ensuring there are adequate procedures in place to protect employees, other motorists, residents, and our vehicles.
I'll move that council approve the proposed fleet management policy as presented with an effective date of October 1st, 2023.
Moved by Councillor Thorne,
Second.
seconded by Premier Bannister. Questions to the motion? No questions to the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary mind? John? Aye. And contrary minded? Motion carried. With that, we'll move on to item number 8, reports from administration. Item 1 in that section, notice of motion regarding municipal democracy.
I will pass this one over to Councillor Tory if you want to say a couple things first. I'll just give a bit of a procedural lowdown, whereas this is the first time in our new procedural bylaw that we have this. So this was introduced at the last council meeting as a notice of motion, which then goes on the agenda accordingly. After this, it comes back in the form of a CRF. And so we've done a little bit of digging and communication with Elections New Brunswick, who's forwarded us to DELG, Environment Local Government, who has not gotten back to us on clarity. So the interpretation of the pieces of legislation in here are not from DELG. They are our own interpretation with some guidance from Elections New Brunswick, who essentially is the last step. Basically, there is legal clarity, I would say, that needs to be provided to clarify what section of the act we fall under should council decide to proceed with reviewing the ward boundaries that became that came into effect in November through the last election, but technically on January 1st. However, there is the option, regardless of where we fall into, to request or formally in the legislation petition, but really that is basically a motion of council and a formal request. Although it sounds a bit more formal than that, it's really not. The minister, and so as part of that, what we're recommending is to take the elements from the notice of motion, provide it in a formal report to council. There's a lot of this information that we're going to be diving into this summer for other applications, whatever that may be, that will help us also quantify what data exists and what data we can pull together to be able to make an informed decision on that. And so that's kind of a little bit of the background that we've done. Like I said, the legal interpretation is not from the lawyer Alexis de Brunswick or DELG. It's our interpretation of the act, which is all listed in there. I'll leave it at that and then maybe pass it over to you, Councillor Detour, if you have anything to add or context to provide.
Yeah, I think, I'm obviously not gonna go through the whole document. It doesn't take that long to read, but at the end of the day, it's pretty self-explanatory. I think what, we could start with is, for those of us who were on the transition committee, as we were, progressing through the committee, we had to make a determination of the structure and make recommendations relative to the number of counselors, et cetera, based on information that we have and had at the time, which, by the way, we didn't have any information at the time. And in fact, if I recall correctly, and it may just be my recollection, it would seem to me that the impression that we were being given is that the LSDs that were coming and being part of this new community were actually not going to form a major part as it relates to population, tax base, and other things as compared to what was already part of the village. And as information became more available, and as a result of that, that's part and parcel of the decisions that we made as to how many counselors should be in representing what is Ward 3 now, how many counselors we should have in the LSDs. And I know we had some discussion about it. And when we started getting some information that gave us the impression that perhaps that wasn't the case, we were told by our chairman that it was too late, that there was no changes that we could make to how we set up the governing body here. So at the end of the day, we're now in a position where we're going to have much more information. I think we're in a position to revisit, if we think about, sort of representation by population and region, and perhaps other things that might make more sense for us to do moving forward. I wanted to make sure that this was something that we talked about with much more time left to come, and we weren't leaving this until the 11th hour, and by that time probably it would have been too late. And it also, I think, if we get to a point where we realize what we do have, we can provide more information to our residents. And also, I think it provides more information not only to those who might be interested in running again next time, but also other residents who might be interested as well in participating in local government. So I think we've got lots of time to do this, and while we're getting all kinds of information for other reasons, it makes sense for us to move forward and have a good discussion about this at some point in time in the near future.
So with that, that's kind of the formal presentation pieces of it. There is a recommendation that we can have more discussion. I will add that we kind of shortened the recommendation, and from a timing perspective, we said the report would come later in 2023. We would have the reports the information, the data by the fall, which then we can add that onto a committee of the whole agenda to be able to kind of dive through with council and present that data. A wide variety of data, which we can make sure we have input from DELG, that sort of information or legal opinion based on their interpretation of their own act. And then after that, council can give direction to us as to, do we make a recommendation? Do we look at what other municipalities have done if that's not already in the initial report? And then go from there. So that's the amended motion based on our recommendation. So with that, basically we need a mover and a seconder or someone to amend and go from there.
Amend before we move? or-
I'll move the council direct administration to prepare a report with additional demographic data for public consultation in late 2023 to consider potential ward structure changes. based on this data at a future date. We have to have the recommendation before we start
Yeah.
talking about it, so that's why I just jumped ahead and did that.
Moved by Deputy Baxter,
I'll second.
second by Councillor Colwell. Questions to the motion?
I have a question or comment. I don't know if it's a question or a comment, but I know when we like initially started talking about like through the transit thing, all that, we had thought going in at large versus by ward was kind of what we wanted, I think collectively, remember? Is that still an option? Like, would that save a lot of time and effort on this?
It would still be an option. The only thing I would caution against would be that should we do that, there, especially in the initial stages of the new municipality, there would be a risk of not having as many people
Perception
from
and-
outside
Yeah.
wards, given the fact they haven't voted.
Next election.
Yeah,
correct?
I personally, and I hear what you're saying, it's obviously an option, and we did talk about that, I know Rob and I even had conversations about it before. While I don't, and I'm just thinking out loud here, I think that in the distant future, and I don't mean like 20 years from now, that might be a good option, but I think in the short term, and I'm thinking a couple of elections or there, we need to encourage people from outside of the village to participate in the local municipality. And the only way we do that is we force the issue by having these wards or thereabouts where you need to have someone who lives in the ward.
You have to have.
That's representation.
I mean,
And I can tell you one thing, when I talk to the people in my ward, it's a pretty big issue. And I think that there's still maybe too much noise about the, some of the people that are not particularly pleased about the restructuring as it is. And what we need to do is I think we need a little bit more water under the bridge to show how we can collectively work together and that there's good representation across all the wards. And, one of my goals, and it's just a personal goal, is to get one or ones in my ward to want to, apply for a counselor job the next time, because the more people we get involved, I think the better. And even if they don't necessarily win, they learn a lot about the process, right? And you guys are great educators when it comes to that, so.
I think Joe articulated it well. When we went through the process, the challenge would be the numbers that were provided were not correct. They were disproportional actually in some areas that actually indicated they were bigger, other areas were smaller, and it turned out actually to be the opposite.
Yeah.
So decisions were made based on that, and even boundaries.
I think it was dictated more so than a decision.
Yeah, so boundaries were actually made, and actually decisions on, even for instance, Coverdale going down into the 895, going down into Mullins, that might have been a different decision had we had all the facts at that time. So I think, I like the idea that, and pragmatically, regardless of this motion, it's a good motion. But regardless of, it was something I do believe the clerk's office was working towards from a data collection perspective. Much of the data that they're collecting on number of houses, tax base, I'm assuming that would all fall into the request from Councilor Notori. So I do think it's an exercise, regardless, it's something that we need, regardless of, even from what I'd say an audit perspective on where our money's going in other areas to figure out growth in different areas and how we service different areas on what's happening. So I think it's good. I think once we have that data, then obviously the clerk's office will be able to come back with some recommendations looking at, again, I think we could take that later and talk about how that will look from a recommendation and study.
I do have a question.
Councilor Flint.
I guess mine's not so much a question, maybe more of a comment. I would agree that the ward system is working well, or can work well, and I think it really ensures that we do have that representation from all of the wards, and I think that's really, really important to have. I'm a little bit concerned about trust in elections NB to make another change, like this past election was messed up. And we're gonna propose to change it again for the next term, which I know is still 3 years away. And my second concern really is, and I mean, all that can be discussed when we actually get a recommendation from staff. But my first is the timing of this report. Is it really required that we have it in 2023, and is that a reasonable request for staff?
I think I'll just touch on the elections of Brunswick one first, just really quickly, only because like every municipality that was affected, elections of
Mhm.
Brunswick would have been big time rushed in
Yeah.
this. They would have been asking for the same
Okay.
data, probably getting the same data as us that wasn't accurate across the board. Generally, that's not what happens with elections in
Right.
Brunswick. They are generally, they're stewards of the process. And so I would say that there are a lot of conversations happening internally to make sure those types of
Okay.
things do not happen again. Whenever we've asked questions of them, they've generally been very helpful
Okay.
with what information they had. Like, so that's always the gap, is the
Okay.
information. On timing, I would say it's not going to necessarily add a huge burden, only because the information that we're proposing to be in the report will be information that we're actively going to start getting ready anyways. So whether that be in the rec master plan, whether it be for the budgeting season, when we present to council what the usage of different programs are for inside, outside areas. We need to deep dive into historical permitting data for the sake of an application that's coming up. So those things are generally relatively seamless for something like this because they'll already be done. And we left it flexible where we kind of said late 2023 in the sense that if it needs to be after the budget, it can be after the budget. However, most of this information you're going to get during the budget process anyways.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if that changes, we'll bring it forward, but I don't
Okay.
see it now. Yeah.
Alright.
Yeah. Being
Councilor Kwan?
So I feel I must share my feelings. I did not love this motion originally, and I still don't. I think it's too soon to be looking at reconfiguring anything because you need a certain amount of time to make sure that what's working isn't working or is working. And I didn't love that asset ownership was not included in the original makeup. So I'm happy to see that in your report, you're gonna take a look at asset ownership, because while I do 100% agree that ward representation is important for the outside areas joining the community, I think it's important to also remember that the former village of Salisbury owned all of our assets. You didn't even know there was a sewer here that we took care of until a few months ago, right? Like there's a lot of stuff that's in Ward 3 that requires also fair representation. And until roads are incorporated into us that are part of the wards, like, I just feel like we need to look at that as well.
And I think that's another piece that they haven't given us any other indications, but I suspect they're going to come back to us for a treatment plant in an outside ward too.
Right.
That will give us an idea of what's the
Exactly.
dollar value for that.
Right, but I also feel like 1 year of information that you're gonna put in this report doesn't really tell me anything. I'd like to have 2 or 3 years of information to see how many people are participating and from the outside areas, you know what I mean? Like, a year seems not like a lot, but if it's gonna be a continual living, breathing document that keeps getting updated with information.
I think that would be
I'm
the
into
hope.
that.
I think that would be the hope too, because I think that regardless of that's why this kind of information, regardless of the ward system, will be helpful because it will help from a budgeting perspective even
Right.
because of the concept of shared costs, not shared costs. Council could in this budget season say there's no shared or
Right.
subunit specific costs, but I wouldn't want council to make that decision without numbers to back that up. And so
Exactly.
a lot of this will be kind of helpful during the budget process. And that will mean future budgets too, I would suspect,
Yeah.
unless council says no divided costs. So I think that's something that we'll continue to add on, and at least if we start that conversation, I would say by the end of 2023, when we have this information, council won't be ready to say, okay, we're gonna switch to this model, or we're gonna keep it the same.
Right.
It'll probably be more direction for us, hence why I think we'll bring it back to committee of the whole, to
Yeah,
be able to say, here are some options. Do we dive into this more? Do we dive into this more? I
I
think
feel
really
more
it's
comfortable
more
with
of a
that.
Yeah, and I think
information
that,
gathering.
I would
Yeah.
agree. I think that what we wanted to, or what I wanted to do by introducing this motion is make sure that we weren't waiting too long before we
Yeah.
started this process.
I get that. It just feels really early in it and kind of divisive a bit, like, oh, are we not doing a good enough job representing the entire community at this point, which I feel like we are.
Yeah, but I don't,
But-
so to answer that, I would have no problems with the existing structure forever if I knew it was all these same people who were gonna be here for the next 10, 15,
Right.
20 years. But the problem is, and that's just me going back to my, processing days and as a project manager, is we need we need to have a process that doesn't necessarily rely on the goodwill or not goodwill of individuals. And I think we all realize that, at least so far, in all of our other communities that we live in, it's representation by population amongst other things. And I agree with you. We should have all the data, including, I put some data in there only because I didn't have any other data, right? So, and as I mentioned to Austin when we were putting it together, and kudos to him because I appreciate helping me to figure out how to write the motion in the first place. I don't even know if that data is correct today, but that's all the data that we had and have, you know, and most of that data I got from the great big book that we all got when we first got together. So I think at the end of the day, it's important for our residents to know that they're properly represented based on the contribution that they feel that they're making to the town, whether that's voting population, whether that's, you know, tax base, whatever it might happen to be, that we need to make sure that, you know, that we're doing that. Again, as I said, if it was just the people around this table, I would never have a problem because I wouldn't think that that would be an issue. But let's face it, you know, we look around the world today and we can't count on people who are necessarily going to be doing the right thing for everyone in the community that they're responsible for. So if we put a process in place and if things change, if all of a sudden, you know what, we have a major development in and around Ward 3, and that needs to be changed some year in the future, well then, so be it, it should be changed.
Any additional?
I have
Councillor
just
Colwell?
one more clarifying comment because I want to go back to, I'm not against the ward system. I just want to throw that out there. I just was sharing the initial sentiment and I'll share where it came from for me personally as a voter and not as a councilwoman. As a voter, I wanted to be able to vote for everybody that was making decisions for me at the table, which is why I was kind of
I agree with
pushing
that.
the answer at large because irrelevant of, like, there is sometimes a bit of a divide or a feel of a divide because we're all voting on the same things, but don't have the same priorities or
Yeah.
interests in our wards. So as a voter, that's where my initial sentiment, like my empath side of me went, was I want to be able to vote for everybody representing me and everybody who has a vote on everything that we decide. So I just wanted to share that. It's not that I'm against the ward system. I think it's great for where we are, 100%. I just wanted to share where I was coming from with that comment.
Thank you, Councillor Colwell. Any additional comments? No additional comments.
I'd like to throw my 2 cents in if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
I'd like to echo Stephanie's thoughts. I do think this is premature. And there really hasn't been enough council business done yet for us to really determine what the best makeup going forward should be. Having said that, I do agree with data collection and trying to get a good idea of where we all are and trying to figure out what exactly where we're trying to go. But this is a bit early to be having this discussion, but we will have to have it in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Dykstra. With no additional questions, all in favor of the motion? Ron?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion carried. Item number 2 in section 8, Pine Hill Cemetery Limited Grant Request.
Okay, so Pine Hill Cemetery is a non-denominational cemetery located in East Main Street, run by a volunteer board of directors. The Village of Salisbury supported this board for many years. Its name is on the cemetery vault as a sponsor for that vault, which is one year they did a little bit more fundraising for. The grant has been used to help maintain the grounds, ongoing improvements throughout the years. According to the board, the cemetery weathered quite well this winter, so there's no big damage. So this year they're planning on planting some additional trees. And also the front gate entrance needed to be replaced. The board had asked for their annual grant again, which has typically been the $500, and we asked them or encouraged them to possibly submit for the multi-year grant agreement. And just say that this money was incorporated, or the 500 was incorporated when we were trying to discuss how much money for the grant, for the budget. So
This will also allow us to not bring it forward for 5 years.
Every year,
basically,
yeah.
Yeah, which should save some time.
Yep.
And is our first, oh no, we had one other multi-year request. The
Womp
first,
womp.
the first multi-year request that was brought forward to us as a request. It
Right.
wasn't through
There
last
you
year's
go. There
budgeting
you go.
exercise.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll move that council approve a multi-year grant agreement between the town of Salisbury and Pine Hill Cemetery for the provision of a $500 annual grant for the next 5 years.
A second.
So moved by Councillor Thorne, seconded by Deputy Mayor Bannister. Questions to the motion?
Is this Salisbury Road?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. Apparently.
I'm just gonna make a comment. We had a counselor from Heartland here last week that just mentioned that they went through a similar amalgamation process such as ours. And, actually, Deputy Mayor Bannister was part of the conversation around this whole bringing community together and having inside outside. And we always had inside outside grants available in our community. We always made them available through the outside LSDs. He brought up an interesting scenario. This is just something I'm just bringing up just from a thought process perspective that they actually did a whole project around cemeteries within the whole region and the LSD areas as well as a bringing people together type of a scenario on beautification and upkeep of cemeteries in the region.
To your point.
And
brings up-
I think I'm just talking more longer term wise as we look at committees, and look at different things. Even as we start to look at Salisbury 250 later, there's some historical cemeteries in our area as well that perhaps could be looked at. Again, I'm not asking that to be part of the motion, just bringing it up that it was Councillor Lee Patterson that was here in the community and shared that with us. I thought it was a great idea. So I'm just bringing that up for future thought to the council, not to do with the motion at this time.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was
Oh,
gonna
thank
suggest
you.
the same thing and an expansion to all cemeteries in the ward, in all the wards and the village itself.
He had a success story with it, and it's great to be out there and talking to these other counselors that have the same, you know, they're creating pathways to bring everybody together.
Right.
This was something that he shared that was a success story, and they've already done it. Like, this is something that's already in motion, right? So they recognize the exact same thing that you're stating. They want to have everybody being represented or feeling like they're being represented as being one unity. So, and it was an easy transition for them.
Mhm.
Very good.
Okay.
That was a great story.
So I'll just make a point of that. Maybe it's something the clerk's office could come back with a recommendation on in the future, if we could.
Yeah, that's why I asked. So Harlan, we
Sorry,
can look into
yeah.
that for
We
sure.
need to find out how many cemeteries we have in all the wards.
Yeah, yes.
More data collection.
There's gotta be some sort of registry or something.
Yeah, but there
Yeah.
are some,
Yeah, I know.
there's a couple cemeteries like out your way that have.
There are a lot of cemeteries on the sanatorium road. I'm just saying.
I know, right?
Well, people have been around here for a long time.
That's why
Over
we're
250.
celebrating the 250, so this is
Yeah.
pretty soon, so.
Yeah.
With that, do we have any additional questions to the motion? With.
No, just a good idea of what exactly is available for funding for that and if we have to add to the budget for that in the future, because I think that's a wonderful idea. It's a great way to show the flag all around the entire village or the entire town. And a lot of the cemeteries are struggling. They're all volunteer boards and everyone's going to use their services in the future. It's a wonderful idea.
This is true.
Yeah, actually, John, you brought up something to set another point. There was an article in the paper today by David Campbell, no relation because he's a brilliant man. But he talked about volunteerism in the province is significantly down. That's a major risk in, I think we've seen it in our local community, but we're seeing it province-wide. And I do think that's another area that we're gonna have to tackle as a municipality, that how do we get more volunteers out? How do we get youth involved? How do we get more seniors involved? How do we continue to keep people involved? But it's being identified as a major risk in our province right now. So I'm glad you brought that up, Councillor Dexter.
And even in some of these subcommittees that we're creating, like, we could be purposely trying to get someone from each of the wards, like making up the subcommittees with a representative from each of the wards and the town. Just bringing more unity together, right?
It's a good point.
Mm.
I think people are just waiting to be asked to do
Well,
things.
yeah.
I think that's, and so often when it comes to volunteers, we keep asking the same people over and over again to do things, and then they get burned out and we never see them again, right? And rather than trying to spread the work. And the only other comment I'll make that I didn't read the article, but I've heard from other people that have seen it, is when government tries to do so much, people just sort of back off and think, well, it's not the town council or the city or the province, it's their responsibility. I don't need to get involved. So I think we just need to be mindful of the fact that, when we want things done, we have to start considering whether it's something that we facilitate rather than something that we do.
With no additional questions, all in favor of the motion? John? Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. With that, item number 3 in section 8, request to fly the pride flag.
So council has received a written request from a resident to fly a pride flag to recognize June as Pride Month. We've included a couple of recommendations in this only because a lot of municipalities do often get requests for special occasions, flag raisings, commemorative events, what have you. And so initially we did have this on the docket for 2023. Obviously, that was not at the top of the list, so we have since shifted it. Not expecting a request to come in. So we do have 2 recommendations that would have to be moved basically separately, which would ensure that we have a policy to regulate these types of requests. It's not out of the ordinary to get a number of them as a municipality. And so we would have to basically outline the process for that. There's some examples in there from neighboring municipalities, mainly Moncton and Riverview. But given the request that came in, we are looking for a motion from council. The recommendation on the floor is to proceed, but we want to make sure that council is comfortable doing that and directing us in coming back with a recommendation for a future policy to be developed. So with that recommendation and then discussion.
You want the first one first?
Yes,
Mhm.
yeah.
I'll move that council approve the request to fly a pride flag for the remainder of the month of June.
So moved by Councilor Colwell. Seconded by Councilor Thorne. Questions to the motion?
So I wanted to just make a comment as it relates to this, and this is based on my experience running some very, very large organizations. And I know it's different in a town situation. But I just want to say that I think that we have to be very careful about, how I look at the flag, for instance, and I think that, that's our logo. I can use that as an example. Anybody who's worked for a company, you never mess with the logo. We should have a process first and foremost before we decide how we're going to proceed. Because if we decide to proceed here and then make a determination that would make it more difficult, let's say, for other groups to be able to be recognized, it could end up being a bit of a problem. From my perspective, I think that in whenever any of the groups that I ever managed, there was no special groups that were ever where we highlighted those groups the way you would with a flag. It didn't mean that I would on a regular basis communicate to the staff, for instance, that it was such and such a day or such and such a month, and give a little and recognize those particular groups, and ask the staff to recognize and respect colleagues who are part of those groups, but not necessarily something like raising a flag. I think it's if you set this precedent, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to come. I just checked for June, just through the internet. There's 50 different groups that could potentially come and ask us,
Question too.
for a flag. And which ones do you say yes to? Which ones do you say no to? And some of them are not insignificant groups. Some of them are, ones that perhaps we were highly likely not going to hear from. But we do have National Indigenous Peoples Day in June. We've got the National Acadian Day in August. We've got National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Those are just to name a few. And that's, we're going to get more and more and more. And I'm concerned about us going forward without having a formal process. And maybe we don't even have the right equipment. I see a flagpole out there, but how many flagpoles do we have? Maybe we need to have more than one flagpole. Maybe we need to.
The flagpole was actually brought up when we originally talked about having a flag policy process. But there is the one flagpole. We talked to our MP and MLA about potentially adding additional flagpoles, but in light of we still need to have a flag policy or a policy around that as well. So
Aren't both these flagpoles considered our flagpoles?
They both are, but they're
Okay.
on just different properties, so I
Right.
guess the question being, I don't know this is where I would really want, I guess, some guidance around, you have different flag policies on, the city of Moncton has the 5 flags, and they'll talk about the Acadian, the provincial, the Acadian, the big one, so they'll go in the order of where they're at. But when we put a flag up, we have the one flag, we don't fly the Canadian flag when we do that, so I'm not sure what is the right, what we
This-
should be doing.
The city has a special event flagpole.
Yeah, and
So they have one
River-
almost every
And
year.
Riverview has what they call,
Riverview has a lot.
Riverview has one that they have
For-
special pole.
Flags that would rotate?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I, you know what, I think that would be a good conversation to have in terms of, I don't know, I guess it's just my own preference. I'd hate to see the Canadian flag, not be flying, on the town hall. And, regardless of what flag was up there. I think it's a flag that everyone who lives in the community, we're all a part of. And so if we need to, do something different, whether it's another flagpole, whether it's a different venue where we, celebrate and recognize, groups that are an important part of our community, maybe at the park or something of that nature. It's nice for us to be able to sit down and, as we're going through bylaws and other things like that, and determine what the process moving forward should be.
Well, I think it's, now that the motion's here, I guess, one of the, I guess,
It's the
one of
first
the.
one.
I would say, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Just, if I could interject, I would say we have the discussion on the second one or discuss that motion, just because we can amend that to include some of these things, some other options that isn't an alternative. I never really had thought of it until now. I don't think others have done it, but we can come forward with a list that in the policy stipulates the different events or themes or proclamations of sorts that would be
Yeah.
covered by the different flags. And then in order to add one, a motion from council would be needed. We could do something like that as
Yeah.
well.
And even,
also-
even something as simple as, does it have to be a whole month? I mean, when we have so many of the groups that potentially are going to ask us, there's only 12 months, right? I mean,
Yeah, I have a lot of questions. You mentioned
So-
proclamation as well, so just.
Well, I just think with the motion, I think we should do
Yeah,
the first one and then go to the second one.
Or do you want,
Unless there's more discussion on the first motion.
Well, now I'm confused as to what my discussion should be because
So,
we don't have a policy.
Right.
Yeah.
We've already set precedent when we flew the Ukrainian flag.
And
So is it fair to vote yes to this when we don't have a policy, and does it create future confusion?
Right.
Now I'm confused as to
I
what to
think
do.
it should be in reverse. I think
Yeah.
we need to,
But I think if you do them in reverse, you miss the opportunity to fly the pride flag, which was what the original request was. So now I don't know how you would like to proceed, because I have thoughts on both.
yeah, I have a real problem with putting the flag up only now, because depending on the
Yes.
decision that we make, okay, we could be setting a precedent that is not going to be commensurate with whatever decision that we.
Would like us to set a precedent by flying the flag.
But I think he means a precedent for all
It's a-
future
it's-
flag
For all-
requests.
for all
the
flags.
We did
precedent,
it
yeah.
already. We didn't get an influx of flag flying requests.
That's true.
We've already done it twice. We had Truth and Reconciliation, Ukraine. We've already done it. Like for the last 18 months.
I am, I was settled when we started,
Agreed.
and now I'm not,
No, I'm not.
because, well, for a couple reasons. One, we only have one flagpole,
Yeah, that's. it.
and,
Two
oh,
flagpoles.
sorry, but on this,
This part-
on this property,
Right.
we have one.
I guess I consider this whole,
Yeah,
complex.
yeah.
it's a compound.
If we direct, like our next motion, I know, we almost have to talk about both of them at the same time, but if our next motion,
If we can do that, I
we
think.
give direction.
That was my
Yeah,
question.
yeah. They have to be made separately or amended to.
So we could amend the first one to include never mind.
All right.
Yep.
So what I'll say on the pride flag request, fly it for the rest of June, is this would, in my opinion, 150% be a flag we would approve to fly. Just based on my guess on what's done nationally, provincially, by city, by
Right.
town. Why reject it when we're gonna put it all in place very quickly if the next motion goes through? I would just like Anyway, that's my comment. If it's something we're going to approve when this policy goes into place anyways, I would like to honor the request of the resident.
Then let's vote. I move that council approve a request to fly the pride flag for the remainder of the month of June.
That was already moved.
Oh, we already did, yeah, that was already done, John.
Keep up, John, we
We're
got
discussing,
somebody
we're in
here.
a discussion right now.
You guys are too fast, jeez.
We already did that. We're
So
getting impatient.
you can call the vote.
Okay,
That's.
questions to the motion, additional questions to the motion? No additional questions to the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded?
Aye.
Contrary minded?
Yes.
Yes.
John,
I
were
think so, we
you
voted
for
for
or against?
I am for.
It was an aye.
On the second motion.
Okay, second motion.
Okay.
Motion carried, sorry.
I move that council direct administration to propose a flag policy to regulate future requests for special occasion flights.
And I
Second.
second.
I'll second that.
Well,
We all seconded it.
Seconded by Councilor Thorne, Peter, and first. Okay, questions to the motion?
I'll just jump in here, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I was gonna
please.
say, I'll jump in here just based on the discussion. We can, and I would consider it a friendly amendment. It doesn't need to be a formal motion, but from a timing perspective, if there doesn't need to be, some policies don't make sense to reinvent the wheel. This is one of them.
Mhm.
They're out there. There's very comparable ones in Riverview and Moncton that clearly work. I would say that we can have a discussion internally amongst staff. We've had the discussion, as a secondary flagpole required? The park is a good one. We're having lots of discussions around additional amenities at the park, like that may make sense. And so we can have those discussions internally, but I think from a timing perspective, this isn't something that needs to be reinvented and started from scratch, and we're not totally starting from point zero. So I don't think this is something that will stay on the docket forever and will not be brought forward. It's something that is, as long as council is willing to potentially amend it, if we find that there's a better way to do it, that can come at some point this summer. Like, it doesn't need to be something that needs to stay
Beautiful.
forever. So that can be a friendly amendment without even needing an amendment, is that it would be brought forward this
Would
summer
this
at some
be,
point.
there's the flag policy, but is it, there gonna be a separate proclamation policy, or do they fall in the same realm? Because we'll get requests where they're not asking to fly a flag, a group could simply be, or UMNB, we get them often for UMNB where they're saying it's a Canadian Mental Health Month, which is the town going to do a proclamation in support of. That's different than a flag policy per se. So in that case, I think they should be separate. Only in those cases, they typically come to council for a motion. But I'll bear with the clerk's office on recommendation.
We can double check. I would keep them separate as well, just because it would, like, just for the sake of timing,
Me
would
too.
regulate this flagpole and what flies on it.
Yeah, that's what I felt.
And then there is obviously the notice of motion and resolution section now in our procedural bylaw that can be utilized, but I would keep them separate. And then we can have the discussion when the flag policy comes forward, if it's something else that needs to be discussed, I would say.
Can we find out how much it's gonna cost, put 2 more poles up, that way we can leave the Canadian flag and Brunswick flag up at all times and have a special events flag?
I'd recommend talking to Rob Moore's office, because he did feel
Yeah.
there was funds available for that.
I think if we have the additional flags, it gives us a lot more flexibility,
Mhm.
and it gives the community more flexibility. And then we can set some parameters around it. Again, as I said, for me, it's just, I feel more comfortable having a policy that we can state and that everybody knows what it is,
Yeah.
and that,
Well, I think, I agree. I've read a lot of other municipalities' policies, and I'm very confident our clerk's office putting it together, but, timing around requests, because obviously who's paying for the flag? If we're paying for the flag, then obviously you need proper notice to be able to fire one. In some cases, they're very hard to get in short notice. So there's those type of things, and again, at some point, if you get too many of them, it could be something we need to examine. Okay. With that, item number.
Further questions on the motion? We didn't move that one, right? We didn't.
No, we didn't yet. Additional questions to the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Contrary, John?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion carried. Item number 4 in section 8, terms of reference, Salisbury 250 committee.
This is the formal adoption of proposed terms of reference for Salisbury 250 committee, which essentially is another, similar to the bylaw one, an ad hoc committee that is being proposed in light of applications being submitted primarily to Canadian Heritage, but currently, but eventually also to the province, mainly RDC, the Regional Development Corporation. Very similar to the structure of the other ones. It has a mandate, procedure, and decisions, and then composition. We are recommending some representatives from specific organizations, including community members, representatives from 2 organizations based on the grant criteria for Canadian Heritage, and then council representation as well. The reason we're bringing this forward is because from a timing perspective, these meetings will start in the fall, because obviously 2024 will come fast. And so this committee will actually start, although the other ones have been approved, before the other ones as we start that transition, just because there are grant commitments pending approvals that we'll have to meet for this. So this will be the committee that will be spearheading that with the support of staff and community groups and sponsors and organizations and even external groups and organizations that will hopefully join us as we celebrate this occasion. So recommendation, and then happy to speak to any specifics.
So I move the council approve the terms of reference for the Salisbury 250 committee that shall remain in place until the end of 2024 as part of the Salisbury 250 celebrations.
So moved by Deputy Mayor Bannister,
I'll second
seconded by Councillor Detory. Questions to the motion, Councillor Thorne.
Just a quick question, in light of our very recent conversation, would this not be a great opportunity to change the terms of reference to put community members from different wards being required? Instead of just saying community representation for members, maybe it's community representation,
Great.
one from each
Great
ward.
idea.
Yes, that's great. Yeah.
Whole area.
That's great.
Unless you think that would be hard, and then you could do it in the council member.
We asked for
situation as well.
postal codes for that very reason. Yeah,
Okay.
so we did that for the other ones too, for that reason. So I would also consider that a friendly amendment, Dan. I don't think we need to have a formal motion for that, just because when we have to bring forward the names when we do the public call, like we have for the other ones. And there may be some from other ones that we reach out to and say, because we haven't appointed the others, other than council. So we may be able to look at that. There's some that have expressed interest. So I would say we will consider that when we bring forward the.
So if we have people that we want to tap on the shoulder in our wards and ask them if they wouldn't mind participating in something like this, that's okay.
Yeah, it's on the committee page already on the website. It is an option, I think, right, already, but yeah. So the form is online.
Just, I think you got a typo in the procedures and decisions on the
probably.
date.
Where?
You got January 2024. I assume they're in place until,
January 2025.
2025.
Yes, yeah, we will fix that too. Yeah.
So do you have, on the site, anything that we can use as a reference when we're talking to people about this 250?
There's a description on this one, I think, too, on the page. Yeah, we can send around in the WAG. We'll send out
Yeah,
the.
if you could
the
do,
direct
that would be
link.
great.
Yeah.
And if everybody likes the terms of reference, we can put that on there too, if you really wanted to, or.
Yeah,
a
the
little bit
full-
more,
yeah.
but
That would
it
be
was
good.
ready before.
Yeah.
Because I think the other ones, do they have they just have an overview or a description, right?
This is a great, there
Good luck.
couldn't
with
be a
it.
better idea to bring
Good
people,
night.
to bring people together.
On the motion?
Additional questions to the motion? No additional questions, all in favor? Contrary minded?
Aye.
Perfect. Motion carried.
No, John's been contrary minded all day.
Good, it's good, we don't have any
Wanna
4 to
see
3 votes here.
That's just a delay. I'm not contrary minded.
It'd be like an overtime here.
Just-
John comes in with a winning vote. Okay, with that, item number 5, in section 8, summer committee of the whole meeting.
Dan, you might have to correct me here, but I'm gonna try to give the explanation, just because historically, there's only been council meetings, not committee of the whole. So usually, in the summertime, the former village did not have the first meeting of the month, they only had the second. We're in our procedural bylaw, it stipulates that our regular meetings are held the first, and our committee of the whole meetings are held the second, that we cancel or not hold our committee of the whole meetings, with the justification that committee of the whole business can happen at council, but council business cannot happen at committee of the whole. And so it's a little bit confusing, but basically we can still give you a presentation at committee of the whole and not request a motion or a decision. We can defer, which we will still do unless it's something that shouldn't be delayed. And so that's our kind of recommendation for a few different reasons, primarily a ratification for both elected officials and staff. So that's really the main reason. We have staff, some that are doing compressed work week. And then between vacation and our attempt to be very diligent at meeting our Wednesday or Thursday morning, sorry, Scott, deadlines for our council packages and getting those to Thursday as well. We'll be able to keep it going this way, and we've kind of adjusted our summer schedule accordingly, pending this discussion. So that's why we're recommending, if we proceed with the usual, to do the first as opposed to the last, based on the fact of what's stipulated in our current procedural bylaw.
Okay, I move that council cancel the regularly scheduled committee of the whole meetings for Monday, July 24th and Monday, August 28th, 2023.
Seconded.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Bannister, seconded by Councillor Thorne. Questions to the motion? No question?
Built-in flexibility is a good thing, in my opinion.
Yes,
We could always have special meetings.
we can have special meetings, John, if we have something come up. And that was one of the things before, the clerk's office protocol we discussed.
Okay,
Any additional questions? No additional questions. All in favor of the motion? Contrary minded? John?
okay.
We're gonna see in Scott's report.
John, were you good with that one?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Motion carried. Number 9, bylaws.
This evening?
Do I not have some? I don't have number 9.
Yeah, there is nothing this evening, yeah.
Oh,
No bylaws, yeah, no bylaws.
okay.
Um,
Oh, yeah. Hence the,
Section 10, closed session, financial 68, 1C, Local Governance Act, land 68, 1D, Local Governance Act, personnel 68, 1J, Local Governance Act.
I'll move we enter closed session.
Do we want to recess before
Oh
closed
my
session?
gosh,
Sorry.
let's move. I mean, we have a
A
recess.
motion before
We
we
need a motion to, I need a motion.
She
she did.
For Councillor Thorne,
Yes.
to enter recess, seconded by Councillor Thorne. All in favor?
Aye.
John?
Pop it in a bit. I move that we return to regular council session.
Second.
Councillor Glad for come back from recess to regular council session, seconded by Deputy Mayor Bannister. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Great minded? Aye.
Aye.
Vote? Aye, okay.
Now we need to move her for.
Now I need a mover to go back to go into closed session.
I move to go into closed session.
Moved by Deputy Mayor
Second.
Bannister, seconded by Councillor Bland. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded?
Aye.
So can we somehow see how Mr.
Remember,
Okay,
it's
well,
me.
return back to regular council, so. by
So
Councillor
moved.
Thorne, seconded by
Seconded.
Some people have to go.
Bannister. Regular council session.
I'll have an extra coffee for you.
Okay. Where are we at now, sir? Mayor.
Mayor and council statements and inquiries. So I would like to thank Councillor Vittori, Councillor Bland, Deputy Mayor Bannister, and Councillor Dykstra, who were up at the Taste New Holland open house grand opening on Friday. You know, obviously, I think it was, Councillor Vittori made a comment, it was the best open house we've ever seen there. It was very phenomenal. I think, like to extend, thanks to Byron McGrath and his wife and sons for a phenomenal job they did up there. We had Mary Andrew Harvey from, the District of Carleton North up, as well as, Councillor Lee Patterson from Heartland, and I think half of the western part of the province came down to show
Yes.
support,
Yes.
which just is a true testament to a business owner that many people would travel down to show support. So kudos and congratulations on the for many years, for the work we're gonna do in our area. We had, I'd like to thank Councillor Vittori, one of his residents, from his constituency was the class president, Emma Dukas. She asked to come and spend some time learning about municipal politics, last week, so she came in and spent some time with Austin and, Joe and I. We invited her back to spend some time with the rest of the council, after she graduates from the Building more time, so you guys hopefully can get to spend some time and talk about municipal politics to our youth. Hopefully we'll be our future leaders.
It's very, very impressive, young girl.
Nice.
Yep. very-
Awesome.
And I guess with that, obviously the graduation is taking place, next week, so congratulations to our graduates. To the clerk's office, they did have an inquiry. I'm gonna be talking with, Mr. Carr next week on the 95, the condition of the road up there. I had 4 residents approach me on that. Obviously, I got another inquiry with the CN yard just up at the end of Portsmouth, by a resident that, they're getting a lot of, I told them obviously probably RCMP, a lot of individuals going in and doing spinouts and turning around with travel flying. That yard, that area is owned by CN. There's not really much we can do about it. They recognize that, but I just did want to bring forward that we are getting a lot of concern, particularly with people using that as a throughway, coming down the end of Horseman, speeding and then going through the Fredericton Road, which is obviously where that tragic accident happened.
Yes.
This summer. The resident did ask me about speed bumps. I just wanted, I did tell them they'd approach the clerk's office to eventually come to council to talk to the future meeting. They did ask me just to bring it forward. They talked about speed bumps, which I did. I did talk to them about the fact that temporary speed bumps unfortunately would get pulled up by snowplows. They wouldn't be able to be there on a permanent basis, which they did understand. So I just wanted to bring that concern up to the clerk's office so they're aware of that. And then, I guess, I'll leave it with Joe, but Joe and I attended, unfortunately, we couldn't come to the banquet or the open, the playground at the school. We had the community health, assessment, needs assessment, meeting that, took place. And, so I want to thank, Councilor Victoria for being part of that. It's a long process, but we'll go over the next 6 months or so and, hopefully we can establish and, instead of the benchmark, this the assessment was the rationale behind how we get a nurse practitioner and other services in our community previously. So it's a really important initiative. That's what I have.
Awesome.
Any additional? With no additional comments, are there any notices or motions and resolutions?
Be noted on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Can anybody bring, just a point of clarity, can people bring those up with us? If not?
By Wednesday.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Moved by Councilor
Seconded.
Thorne, seconded by Councilor.
Either way.
Mayor Dan,
I don't
first.